Finding joy in solitude after 70, the unexpected benefits of living single. Have you ever found yourself wondering if relationships that once brought you joy have gradually transformed into obligations? If you're in your 70s or beyond, you've likely dedicated countless decades to nurturing others, raising children, supporting a spouse, maintaining a household, and perhaps now you're contemplating what life might feel like with just a bit more tranquility, additional space to breathe, and extra moments dedicated solely to yourself. This video isn't about experiencing loneliness. It isn't about abandoning the concept of companionship. It addresses something more profound. It explores the surprising reality that for many individuals over 70, embracing singlehood can actually lead to enhanced freedom, improved health outcomes, and greater happiness compared to remaining in strained or emotionally unbalanced relationships. Soon you'll discover 7 compelling reasons why being single after reaching 70 may not only be perfectly acceptable but potentially better than you've ever imagined. Whether you're divorced, widowed, or deliberately choosing to navigate life independently, this video speaks directly to your experience. You're about to learn how this particular life stage can evolve into a period of expansion rather than contraction, characterized by emotional clarity, renewed energy, and quiet, sustaining joy. I encourage you to stay with me until the conclusion because what you'll hear today might help you understand your life journey through an entirely new perspective. Now, let's begin exploring these insights together. Reason 1. Emotional exhaustion from long-term compromise. By the time you reach your 70s, you've likely spent between 40 and 50 years accommodating another person's habits, emotional states, needs, and decisions. Even within the healthiest relationships, this kind of prolonged compromise gradually depletes your emotional reserves. This isn't about assigning blame to anyone. It's about acknowledging that the emotional energy you once readily devoted to constant negotiation or people-pleasing has likely diminished significantly over time. Those small irritations you previously overlooked, a slightly raised voice, an occasionally dismissive comment, or consistently surrendering your preferences, now feel considerably heavier and more draining than they once did. After 70, many individuals discover they no longer possess the emotional cushioning they once had to absorb these daily relationship frictions. When you're no longer participating in a relationship that demanded constant adjustment, those everyday tensions simply disappear. There's an unexpected lightness that comes with the freedom to choose what foods you eat, when you sleep, what entertainment you enjoy, and how you structure your life without perpetually considering someone else's preferences or expectations. This isn't about embracing selfishness. It's about psychological recovery and restoration. Consider someone like Ruth, age 74, who spent 52 years in a marriage where she constantly managed around her husband's strongly expressed opinions. After his passing, she found herself making independent decisions for the first time in decades. I never truly realized how much I had surrendered until I finally stopped giving everything away, she reflected. This quiet liberation from daily compromise is something numerous single seniors describe not with sadness but with profound relief. It doesn't signal bitterness. It indicates that you've finally recognized your own emotional boundaries and limitations. After reaching 70, this kind of personal clarity becomes essential for well-being. When you begin prioritizing your inner peace over your tendency to please others, something fundamental shifts within. Your nervous system gradually calms, your sleep quality improves, and you find yourself smiling more frequently without immediately identifying why. Often, it's because you're finally living authentically according to your own values and preferences. At this stage of life, that might be the most precious gift you can offer yourself. Reason 2, daily friction becomes more irritating than comforting as we age. A fascinating transformation occurs. We develop increased sensitivity to tension, even when experienced in small doses. What might have felt like playful bickering during your 40s can feel abrasive and jarring in your 70s. Those everyday quirks that once added color and dimension to your relationship, how they incorrectly loaded the dishwasher or their habit of falling asleep during your favorite films, now grate against your nerves in ways that feel deeply personal rather than endearingly quirky. Here's the underlying reason. As you grow older, your threshold for managing stress diminishes noticeably. Your nervous system doesn't recover from emotional disruptions with the resilience it once displayed. You increasingly crave peace rather than noise, simplicity rather than constant adjustments. Even subtle changes in tone or a lengthy sigh from across the room can begin to feel like pressure weighing heavily upon your chest. It's not that your partner has dramatically transformed, it's that your body, mind, and emotional capacity have evolved. Sometimes even the smallest interactions begin to feel like unwelcome power struggles you never agreed to participate in. That's precisely why solitude for many individuals after 70 doesn't generate feelings of loneliness. Instead, it creates a profound sense of safety and calm. Frank, who recently turned 76, shared that following his divorce at age 68, he was initially shocked by the pervasive quiet that filled his home. However, over time, that quietude became deeply soothing to him. "I always believed I needed someone to engage in conversation with throughout the day," he explained, "but I eventually realized what I actually needed was someone not to argue with all day long." Frank's realization resonates with many others in similar situations. Research consistently demonstrates that older adults report significantly higher satisfaction with solitude compared to their younger counterparts. Why does this pattern emerge? Because they've already lived through decades of noise, conflict, caretaking responsibilities, and chaotic circumstances, and they've gradually come to understand that silence isn't empty or lacking. It's abundantly filled with opportunities for recovery and rejuvenation. When you discover yourself constantly walking on eggshells around your spouse more frequently than experiencing joy in their presence, that's not evidence of failure. It might instead be an important signal from your spirit communicating, "I'm exhausted from negotiating peace. I simply want to exist within it." If you're continuing to watch this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to acknowledge your presence. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I strongly recommend subscribing and activating notifications so you won't miss any future videos. Your ongoing support enables us to continue creating meaningful content designed to inform and inspire you. Now, let's proceed to our next insight. Reason 3. Care burdens tip the emotional scale. By the time you reach your 70s, it's highly probable that either you or your partner isn't as physically or emotionally robust as you once were. That's simply the natural progression of aging. However, what often remains unspoken is how caregiving responsibilities, even in their most gentle manifestations, gradually restructure the dynamic between two people. What previously felt like an equal partnership can subtly transform into a one-sided responsibility. And responsibilities, particularly when they're unevenly distributed, can quietly nurture resentment over time. Consider Martha and Bill, who recently celebrated 49 years of marriage. When Bill's memory began deteriorating, Martha naturally stepped in, motivated by love, certainly. She organized his medications, repeatedly reminded him about appointments, and managed increasingly complex paperwork. But merely 6 months into this new dynamic, she found herself unconsciously sighing before tackling each new task, not because her love had diminished, but because she deeply missed being simply his wife rather than functioning as his nurse, scheduler, and constant safety net. That subtle shift, when your spouse evolves from someone you lean on for support to someone you must constantly manage, creates a distinctive form of emotional fatigue. Unlike during younger years, there's significantly less resilience and energy available to recover from this particular type of exhaustion. You begin wondering, when will I finally get a break? And when the answer consistently remains, never, a hidden bitterness begins taking root. Sometimes this resentment isn't even directed toward the person themselves. It's about feeling helpless in the face of inevitable decline. You're witnessing their suffering, certainly, but simultaneously watching your own freedom and autonomy gradually disappear. You experience guilt for harboring these resentful feelings, but your physical and emotional reactions cannot lie. You're completely exhausted. Each time you rise to handle one more responsibility, you're quietly grieving the version of life you no longer have access to. This doesn't mean love vanishes. It means the accumulated weight of roles, expectations, and exhaustion has obscured the joy that originally brought you together. This explains why being single, without layers of guilt or overwhelming caretaking pressure, can begin to appear as welcome relief, even when tinged with understandable sadness. It also explains why some older adults choose separation not from anger but from a profound sense of self-preservation. Because sometimes expressing love doesn't mean holding on more tightly, sometimes it means stepping back and acknowledging, I still deeply care, but I desperately need to breathe freely again. Reason 4. The erosion of curiosity and shared novelty. One fundamental element that sustains relationships at any age is curiosity, not just about each other, but about life itself, exploring new places, discovering new hobbies and interests. However, after 70, particularly within long-established marriages, that shared sense of wonder can gradually diminish. You wake each morning, sit in the same familiar chairs, discuss the same recurring aches and pains, consume the same predictable meals, and before long, the days blend indistinguishably into one another. This happens not because either person is inherently uninteresting or dull, but because neither of you is introducing fresh elements or experiences into your shared existence. Over time, what once felt comfortably familiar begins feeling stagnant and lifeless. The truth remains that curiosity generates energy and engagement. It creates that essential spark prompting suggestions like, "Let's explore something new together," or, "Did you read about this fascinating development?" Without this vital element, even brief conversations can feel burdensome rather than connecting. You ask, "What would you prefer for dinner tonight?" and receive the same predictable response. You suggest venturing outside the home and hear, "Maybe next week instead." The silence between you no longer feels comfortable, it's heavy with disinterest and disconnect. Many older adults don't immediately recognize this gradual shift. They assume this diminished connection simply represents what marriage naturally evolves into during later years. But this resignation steadily builds internal tension, especially when one partner still yearns for adventure and surprise while the other has quietly accepted monotony as inevitable. This fundamental mismatch frequently leads to resentment, not just toward your partner but toward the version of yourself you've reluctantly become. You begin questioning, when did I stop actively growing? Or more painfully, why am I deliberately shrinking myself to match their limited pace? Betty, age 74, articulated this experience clearly. "I still possessed a strong desire to learn Italian, while my husband simply wanted to rewatch familiar television programs. I gradually realized we were no longer curious about similar things, which made me feel profoundly alone despite not technically being by myself." This explains why many individuals after 70 experience greater freedom once they embrace singlehood. It's not necessarily about disliking their former spouse, it's about rediscovering the exhilarating ability to enthusiastically say yes to life again, to awaken each morning feeling the world continues expanding rather than contracting around you. For some, this quiet freedom ultimately becomes more fulfilling than maintaining a stagnant companionship devoid of growth or shared discovery. If you're continuing to watch this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to acknowledge your presence. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I strongly recommend subscribing and activating notifications so you won't miss any future videos. Your ongoing support enables us to continue creating meaningful content designed to inform and inspire you. Now, let's explore our next important insight. Reason 5. Unspoken emotional debts. As couples journey through decades together, it's not uncommon for old emotional wounds to remain unhealed, not because either person harbors cruelty, but because life's momentum continues forward, and we frequently choose maintaining peace over confronting difficult truths. However, this approach creates a significant problem. What remains unaddressed doesn't simply vanish, it sinks deeper into our emotional landscape. Perhaps your spouse dismissed your career aspirations years ago. Maybe you provided substantially more support to their family than they offered yours. Perhaps you quietly shouldered the weight of caregiving, made countless unacknowledged sacrifices, or even privately absorbed betrayals, convincing yourself, "It's perfectly fine, that happened long ago." But the reality is that these emotional debts, these silent, "you owe me" ledgers, don't dissolve with passing time. They simply harden and crystallize. After 70, with increased time for reflection and fewer external distractions, these accumulated debts often resurface, quietly fueling resentment that colors daily interactions. You begin noticing how consistently one-sided the relationship feels, how genuine appreciation never materialized, how sincere apologies were never properly offered. Even when everything appears calm on the surface, internally you might be meticulously keeping score of these imbalances. Resentment within older couples rarely manifests loudly. Instead, it develops slowly through subtle behaviors, a quiet emotional withdrawal, growing reluctance to engage fully, increasing emotional distance carefully concealed beneath superficial politeness. You might continue preparing meals for them, still participate in walks together, still exchange pleasant goodnights, but deep within, something vital has hardened between you. Kindness begins feeling mechanical rather than genuine, love becomes functional rather than passionate or connected. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as emotional bookkeeping. Throughout decades together, you unconsciously maintain a detailed record of every disappointment experienced. By age 70, that internal ledger often feels overwhelmingly full. Without release through open conversation or mutual acknowledgement, those accumulated entries can transform even minor interactions into sources of pain or conflict. Harold, age 78, reflected, I dedicated 35 years to prioritizing her needs above my own. I never complained openly, but now when I observe her behaving as though I still owe her more, something inside me tightens painfully. I've suddenly realized I've been suppressing my authentic feelings for decades, and I'm completely exhausted by continuing this pattern. This explains why resentment emerging during later years can surprise even the most apparently stable couples, because what was previously suppressed in service of maintaining harmony eventually demands recognition during the quieter seasons of retirement. Unless directly addressed, this dynamic gradually poisons remaining time together, not through dramatic confrontations, but through a pervasive, deepening sadness that colors everything. Reason 6. Shift in identity and purpose. During our younger years, much of our identity is shaped by what we actively do, our professional careers, our roles as parents, providers, and problem solvers. However, after 70, these external identity markers gradually fall away. Retirement, adult children establishing independent lives, and health-related changes can leave us contemplating a quieter version of existence, one that forces us to confront the fundamental question, who am I now? This essential question impacts men and women differently. Some individuals joyfully rediscover long-abandoned hobbies, nurture neglected friendships, or explore spiritual pursuits with renewed dedication. Others feel profoundly lost, as though they've become passive passengers in someone else's journey rather than active participants in their own. When you're sharing life with someone who's adjusting at a significantly different pace or moving in an entirely different direction, friction inevitably develops. Perhaps you've discovered peaceful satisfaction in gardening and establishing simple daily routines, while your spouse remains restless and irritable, constantly desiring travel, material acquisitions, or various distractions from their inner discomfort. Alternatively, you might be actively reinventing your purpose and meaning while they've comfortably settled into watching identical television programs and maintaining unwavering routines day after predictable day. What follows is subtle but powerful. You begin silently judging each other, not necessarily through direct confrontation, but through heavy sighs, meaningful silences, and a growing perception that you simply don't understand each other anymore. You wonder how you managed to share decades with this person yet now feel emotionally disconnected from them. You share meals together, but genuine warmth has diminished. You sit beside them physically, but your minds occupy entirely different emotional and intellectual territories. Psychologists identify this phenomenon as identity drift. It doesn't indicate falling out of love, rather, it reflects two individuals evolving into different versions of themselves at different paces, gradually failing to recognize or appreciate each other throughout this transformation. This is precisely where resentment subtly enters. You increasingly feel misunderstood and unappreciated. You're actively striving to grow, adapt, and make meaningful sense of this new life stage, while your partner either fails to notice these efforts or demonstrates indifference toward them. Eleanor, age 74, shared her experience. After retiring from my career, I resumed painting, an activity that brought unexpected joy I hadn't experienced in years. However, whenever I showed my husband a new completed piece, he barely glanced up from whatever occupied his attention. That's when I realized I wasn't seeking praise or validation, I was simply longing for him to truly see me again. But he either couldn't or wouldn't make that effort. This behavior isn't always intentional or malicious. Sometimes your spouse is navigating their own silent struggles, and neither of you possesses effective tools for discussing these challenges. However, over time, this emotional disconnection increasingly feels like deliberate neglect, and resentment gradually fills spaces where empathy and understanding previously flourished. If you're continuing to watch this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 6 below to acknowledge your presence. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I strongly recommend subscribing and activating notifications so you won't miss any future videos. Your ongoing support enables us to continue creating meaningful content designed to inform and inspire you. Now, let's EXP. Reason 7. Lack of appreciation for invisible efforts. By the time you reach your 70s or 80s, you've established a lengthy catalog of actions you perform for each other that have become completely invisible and unacknowledged. Perhaps you quietly refill medication organizers each week, ensure the thermostat maintains perfect comfort, or manage other aspects of daily living. Maybe you're the person consistently remembering family birthdays, refilling essential prescriptions, or gently encouraging your partner to eat more nutritiously, rest more adequately, or incorporate more physical movement into their routine. These aren't dramatic gestures deserving applause, they're quiet, consistently repeated acts of genuine care and consideration. Here's the challenging reality: over extended time, these actions become expected rather than appreciated. When something transforms from appreciated gesture to expected behavior, it frequently becomes entirely invisible. You might not immediately recognize how deeply this affects you until one ordinary day, while standing at the kitchen sink or carefully putting away their freshly laundered clothes, you suddenly feel it, a sharp emotional sting accompanied by that small internal voice asking, would they even notice if I simply stopped doing these things? This represents the specific emotional fatigue that steadily accumulates when love no longer receives acknowledgement, when caregiving increasingly feels like obligatory duty rather than an expression of shared connection. When you finally address this issue directly, you might hear dismissive responses like, "Well, I never specifically asked you to handle all those tasks." Such reactions cut deeply because your motivation wasn't seeking recognition, you acted from authentic love and concern. However, even love requires sustenance over time. Resentment doesn't exclusively emerge from dramatic betrayals or conflicts, it often develops through these seemingly minor omissions: unspoken gratitude, unrecognized effort, and absent expressions of thanks. You gradually begin feeling more like household staff than beloved spouse. During quiet moments of reflection, you wonder, when exactly did I become completely invisible in this relationship? Harold, age 81, shared his experience. "My wife previously thanked me whenever I repaired anything around our home. Now it seems she simply expects immediate maintenance without acknowledgement. Eventually, I deliberately stopped fixing things entirely. I merely wanted to determine whether she would even notice the difference." This highlights the fundamental danger. When appreciation consistently diminishes, love gradually transforms into labor. And labor without recognition or gratitude invariably leaves emotional bruises that accumulate over time. Final thoughts: rediscovering connection or embracing new beginnings. What begins as vibrant love during our younger years frequently evolves into comfortable routine during our later ones. If we don't remain vigilant, that routine eventually hardens into resentment, not from deliberate malice, but through accumulated years of quiet disappointments, unmet emotional needs, and important feelings left unexpressed. If you've recognized even fragments of your personal story reflected in what we've shared today, please understand you're not alone in these experiences. These feelings don't necessarily indicate love has disappeared, they suggest something within you still legitimately yearns to be seen, heard, and genuinely cared for. That represents the profound beauty of aging. Yes, it introduces new challenges, but simultaneously brings remarkable clarity. You begin recognizing patterns and dynamics that no longer serve your well-being, gradually developing courage to articulate these truths. Whether you've shared 50 years of marriage or currently live under the same roof while experiencing growing emotional distance, it's never too late to positively shift the energy within your relationship, through small meaningful acknowledgments, honest conversations, releasing outdated roles, and collaboratively stepping into new possibilities together. This creates the foundation where healing can begin, even at 70, even at 80 and beyond. If you've ever felt your partner fundamentally misunderstands who you've become, perhaps it's time to gently help them recognize the aspects of yourself that have meaningfully evolved throughout your shared journey. Alternatively, embracing solitude might provide the space needed for authentic self-discovery and renewed joy during this precious life season. Thank you sincerely for joining us today. We would love hearing your thoughts and experiences. Please leave a comment below sharing one specific insight you gained today and how you intend to apply it within your life. Your perspectives matter tremendously to us, so please don't hesitate sharing them openly. Reading your thoughtful comments provides substantial motivation and encouragement for our continued work. If you found this video helpful and meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit from these insights. Your support enables us to continue creating valuable content designed to inform and inspire viewers like you. Thank you for watching. We look forward to connecting with you again in our next video.